Before we define the terms, let's look at the practical journey. Many of you are here because your organization wants that certificate on the wall, but how do we actually get it? The process is formal and rigorous. You don't just mail in a checklist, you have to be audited. Well, step number one, over here what we have is a list of steps of a typical audit. Step number one, it starts with agreeing on the terms of reference and the scope. You tell the auditor exactly what parts of your company you want them to check. Step number two is a document stage. Usually, the auditor will do a stage one assessment first. This is often done off-site. They read your policies, your plans, to see if you have documented what the standard requires. And if your paperwork is missing, they won't even bother visiting. Step number three is the on-site audit. This is the main event. They come to your office, interview your staff, and check if you are actually doing what your document says. They're looking for evidence of process compliance. And the outcome is at the end, they present their findings. If you pass, you get the certificate, and they write to use the logo you see on the screen. Certifications are usually valid for 3 years. And what we have over here are a few of the after certification guidelines. Getting certified is not the finish line. It is the starting line. You don't keep the certificate forever. The certificate is valid for 3 years. And you don't get a 3-year holiday. The auditor will come back annually for surveillance audits. These are smaller checks to ensure you haven't slipped back into older habits. You are also required by Part 1 of the standard to conduct your own internal audits regularly. You can't just wait for external auditor. And at the end of 3 years, you undergo a full re-audit to review the certificate for another cycle. So what does the standard cover? When we talk about the scope of the standard, not the scope of your specific audit, but the book itself, what are we looking at? It addresses every aspect of service provision that is considered mandatory. If it's in Part 1, you must do it. It measures practices that are common to every service provider. It doesn't matter if you are a bank, a hospital, or a cloud host. These management practices apply to you. Ultimately, it demonstrates a level of compliance. It proves to the world that you're not just winging it, you are operating at an internationally recognized level of quality. So on this particular slide, we have the core material, which is Part 1. So we start with the most important document, which is Part 1. This is the standard itself. If you remember nothing else, remember that Part 1 contains the mandatory requirements. Shall means mandatory. In ISO language, the word shall is legally binding for certification. If the document says the organization shall perform internal audits, you must do it. There is no negotiation. You will notice it mentions the high-level structure. This is a standardized template ISO uses for all management systems, like ISO 9001 for quality or 27001 for information security. If you know one, you already know the structure of the others, making integration much easier. So what you have over here on this particular slide is a list of the 10 clauses in Part 1. Clauses 1 to 3, they refer to introduction, references, and terms. Clauses 4 to 10, they talk about the context, leadership, planning, support, operation, performance evaluation, and improvement. So the first 3 clauses are administrative in nature: scope, references, and definitions. They kind of set the stage. And clauses 4 to 10, they are the meat. Clause 4 through 10 are where the work is. This is the plan, do, check, act cycle in action. So 4, 5, 6, they plan the system. 7, 8, they support and operate the system, which is do. 9 is evaluate performance, which is check. And 10 is improve, which is act. And over here we have core material part 2. This is a guidance on application. It is strictly advice, not law. While part 1 uses the word shall, mandatory, part 2 uses should. It suggests good ways to meet the requirements, but you don't have to follow its specific methods as long as you meet the part 1 requirements. I use part 2 as your implementation manual. If part 1 says you must have a change policy and you don't know how one looks like, look at part 2 for ideas. Now, the beauty of part 2 is that it maps one-to-one with part 1. If you're reading clause 6.1 in part 1, you can open clause 6.1 in part 2 to get specific advice on that topic. What it offers, for every requirement, it gives you a summary of what is required, practical guidance on the content, the how-to information on roles and documented information you might need. It kind of bridges the gap between the dry legal text or the standard and the real world. And then we move on to part 3 of the core material. This document is dedicated entirely to scope definition. Why is this needed? Now, defining the scope of your service management system can be tricky. Are we certifying the cloud services, the desktop support, the London office, or the global entity? So part 3 is excellent because it uses scenarios. It gives examples of different organizational structures and explains how to write a valid scope statement for each. If you're struggling to define your boundaries, this is the document to check. Core material parts 6 and 10. Part 6 basically is used by certification bodies, making sure it aligns with ISO/IEC 17021-1. Part 10 basically talks about the overview of concepts and terminology. Now, to wrap up our look at the document family, we have parts 6 and 7. Part 6 is for the auditors. Part 6 is interesting because it is not written for you, the service provider. It is written for the certification bodies. It tells them how they must conduct the audit and certification process. It ensures that whether you are audited by BSI or SGS, the rules of the game are the same. Part 10 is the dictionary. Part 10 is essentially the dictionary and conceptual guide. It explains the relationship between the different parts of the standard. While part 2 contains the definitions legally required for the exam, part 10 provides the broader concepts. You will see a note that definitions are moving to part 1. In the 2018 edition of the standard, the key definitions were indeed consolidated into part 1 to make it a self-contained document. So why do organizations go through the expense and effort of certification? The biggest benefit is independent verification. Anyone can say they offer great service. Certification is a third-party accredited body confirming that you meet the rigorous internal requirements. This naturally leads to improved reputation. In competitive tenders, holding ISO 20000 certification can be the decision factor between winning a contract or losing it. It formally recognizes your service management capability. It proves your maturity level isn't just luck, it's engineered.